Breaking, Britain is on fire again. Not in flames, but in fury. Crowds filled the streets tonight as word spread that Tommy Robinson, one of the most controversial figures in modern British politics, had been taken by police in what witnesses are calling a planned disappearance. There were no warning shots, no public statement, just flashing blue lights, an unmarked van.
Keir Starmer is responsible for the sort of shit that happens there. Because he's put a target on every one of us with his smears and lies for telling the truth. Charlie Kirk told the truth. If Charlie Kirk lived in the UK, Keir Starmer would lock him up. How dare you make comments about his death? When you're responsible for this shit, people with your mindset, condemning people, putting targets on them, lying about them, and then pretending you give a shit. Absolute fucking hypocrisy.
And silence. Within minutes, social media exploded with footage of officers dragging him away through the chaos, men and women screaming his name as if they'd just seen the death of free speech itself. For years, Robinson has been the lightning rod for Britain's anger, the man who says what others are too afraid to. Loved and hated in equal measure, his arrest was never just a personal matter. It was political. It was symbolic. And tonight, it feels like something inside the country has snapped. Reports say the protest began peacefully, ordinary people carrying flags, chanting for truth and justice. But the atmosphere turned the moment police lines advanced tear gas. Shoving, chaos. In the middle of it all, Robinson vanished. Phones went up, streams went live, and by midnight, the hashtag number sign, "Where is Tommy?" was trending across Europe. According to eyewitnesses, the arrest wasn't made by local police. It was orchestrated by a special operations unit under direct government instruction. Anonymous sources claim this was a preventive detention, part of a new internal security order passed quietly last week under emergency powers. But the bigger question remains, why him and why now? Because just 24 hours earlier, Robinson had announced he was releasing a documentary exposing alleged government collusion with foreign NGOs to label dissent as domestic extremism. A film that, if true, could shatter the already fragile trust between the people and those who rule them. Downing Street has gone into radio silence. No statement from the Home Office, no acknowledgement from the Prime Minister, and yet the damage is already done. Footage shows hundreds being kettled in London's Trafalgar Square, men in masks, pensioners waving St George's flags, mothers crying as police drones circled overhead. For years, the government warned of radical threats. But tonight, many are asking if the real threat comes not from the streets, but from the state itself. In the hours following the arrest, independent journalists were blocked from entering the protest zone. Live streams began to vanish from major platforms. Twitter accounts suspended. Videos flagged as harmful misinformation. Even mainstream broadcasters seemed hesitant, referring vaguely to a disturbance without mentioning Robinson's name. It was as if an invisible hand had tightened around the flow of information, squeezing it until only silence remained. But silence breeds suspicion, and Britain is now boiling with it. Nigel Farage called the arrest a direct assault on political dissent. Elon Musk, in a late-night tweet, wrote simply, "This looks like tyranny in real time." And yet, for all the outrage online, the government's response has been cold, procedural and distant. What one former MP described as a chilling echo of regimes we once condemned. In towns across the country, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, spontaneous protests have erupted, not just by Robinson's supporters, but by ordinary citizens who say this is no longer about one man. It's about the right to speak, said one protester, holding a torn Union Jack. If they can take him, they can take any of us. The crowd roared, and for a moment, the energy felt less like a protest and more like a rebellion in the making. Tonight, the streets of London feel like a battleground between two visions of Britain, one clinging to tradition, liberty and defiance, the other enforcing order through quiet control and digital power. The same country that once prided itself on fairness now stands accused of shadow policing its own people. Leaked documents circulating online show internal memos referring to Operation Contain, describing measures to neutralise agitators through surveillance, preemptive detentions and narrative management. If authentic, they confirm the existence of a state machine willing to silence its critics under the banner of public safety. And so the question gripping the nation isn't simply where Tommy Robinson is, it's what his arrest represents. So has Britain crossed an invisible line tonight? A point of no return where protest becomes crime, speech becomes hate, and silence becomes the only safe option for now. All we know is this: Tommy Robinson is gone. His supporters are being rounded up, and the people of Britain are being told to move along, to trust the system, to stay calm. But calm is the one thing this country no longer has. The government may control the airwaves, but it cannot control the streets. Not tonight, not after this, because as darkness settles over Westminster, the old questions return with new urgency. The morning after the arrest, Britain woke up in disbelief. The images were everywhere. Blurred, shaky phone footage showing Tommy Robinson being forced into a police van as crowds screamed and pushed against the barricades. But the broadcast networks barely mentioned it. BBC bulletins referred to civil unrest. Sky News spoke of public order concerns, yet none dared to say his name. It was as if the country had agreed to erase him overnight, but outside the control room, something far larger was brewing. An uprising, not of violence, but of defiance. By noon, hundreds of thousands had taken to social media, demanding answers. Where is he? Became the question that haunted the entire nation. The hashtag that had begun as a protest cry had now turned into a movement. From small towns to city centres, people gathered, builders, veterans, mothers, even clergy, chanting the same word again and again: freedom. For the first time in years, Britain's divisions seemed to blur. This was no longer about left or right, working class or elite. It was about something deeper, a feeling that the system had turned against its own people. In Westminster, panic spread quietly. Reports from insiders described an emergency meeting at Downing Street. The Prime Minister, senior ministers, intelligence chiefs, all summoned before dawn. The topic: containment. One official allegedly warned that information control has failed and that the public perceives political imprisonment. The phrase hung in the air like a verdict, another aide suggested, releasing a controlled statement claiming Robinson had been detained for security reasons. But someone else pushed back, warning that the truth would leak. It always leaks, and leak it did. That afternoon, an anonymous file appeared on encrypted forums, allegedly from within the Home Office. It contained internal memos, dates, times and names, documenting the approval of what was called a preemptive detention order. Signed off under Section 14 of the new Public Safety Act, it granted the government power to detain any individual deemed a potential catalyst for civil disorder. For many Britons reading it, the words felt like something out of Orwell: potential catalyst. A phrase so vague it could apply to anyone: a journalist, a priest, a protester, even a teenager with a sign. By evening, the protests had spread to nearly every major city in Birmingham. The police were forced to retreat from Victoria Square as chants of "Free Tommy" drowned out sirens. In Liverpool, dock workers blocked roads, waving placards that read, "We are not your subjects." Even in Scotland, where Robinson had little following, crowds gathered in solidarity, not for him, but for what he represented. "This isn't about Tommy anymore," one protester shouted into a live stream. "This is about us, about whether we're still free people." And yet, even as the streets filled, the government doubled down. A new directive was issued. Social media posts about the arrest would now be subject to national security review. Major platforms began to remove trending hashtags. YouTube channels reporting on the protests found their videos demonetized or restricted. Journalists attempting to cover the events were denied police access zones. The phrase temporary information lockdown appeared in leaked police correspondence. The irony was unbearable. The state was silencing the very proof that it was silencing dissent. Inside the palace, sources whispered that King Charles had demanded a private briefing. One advisor reportedly warned him that the crisis was threatening the constitutional balance. The king, ever careful, allegedly replied, "Then the balance must be restored." But what did he mean? Would the monarchy intervene or stay silent as Britain fractured beneath its own laws? No one knew. What was certain was that the patronage trust had collapsed. Polls showed a historic drop in faith in government institutions. Even lifelong Labour voters were saying enough was enough. Meanwhile, reports began to emerge of others being taken. Local organisers, independent reporters, online commentators, the government called it preventive action. Critics called it a purge. Late that night, an unverified video surfaced showing what appeared to be Robinson in custody, all pale, silent, seated in a windowless room. Within minutes, it vanished. But not before millions had seen it. The comments were instant, furious, unrelenting. Proof of life, wrote one user. The state has crossed the line, and still Downing Street remains silent. No press conferences, no questions allowed. Just a cold statement read by a junior spokesperson, Miss Visserton. Mr. Robinson has been detained under lawful authority for the prevention of public harm. Those words, public harm, hit harder than bullets, because to many, the only harm being done was to democracy itself. As night fell, rumours spread of military units being placed on alert. London was bracing for another weekend of protest. One that could dwarf anything seen in modern times. Police unions were reportedly split, with some officers refusing to carry out new arrest orders. A senior constable, speaking anonymously, said, "We signed up to protect the public, not to police thought." Something deeper was shifting. The air felt different. The crowds no longer sounded afraid. They sounded determined. A country that had been divided for years by politics was suddenly united by something raw, something powerful, the refusal to be silenced. And so, as the second night of protests began, one question loomed over every city square, every broadcast blackout, every trembling corridor of power. If the people no longer fear their government, does the government now fear the people? By the third day, Britain no longer felt like Britain. London's skyline glowed under the dull red haze of flares and flashing sirens. The government still hadn't confirmed Tommy Robinson's whereabouts, and that silence was breaking something far deeper than law and order. It was breaking trust. People weren't just protesting anymore. They were marching as if to reclaim something that had been stolen. From Sunderland to Bristol, from London to Belfast, the chant was the same. We are the people and not the enemy. The government's line was crumbling overnight. Several whistleblowers emerged. Anonymous officers, junior staffers, even a communications aide from the Home Office, but all saying the same thing, that the arrest wasn't about public safety at all. It was political. It was meant to send a message. One leaked audio recording, allegedly from a closed cabinet meeting, captured a senior minister saying, "If we don't control the narrative will control us." That clip spread faster than the government could suppress it. Every news blackout, every deleted post only proved what people already feared, that the truth was being buried. Then came the shock no one expected. Late that afternoon, Buckingham Palace released a rare statement from King Charles. It was just 39 words, but they hit like thunder. The rule of law must serve the people, not silence them. The stability of our nation depends upon trust and truth. In an instant, the country froze. The statement wasn't addressed to anyone directly, but everyone knew who it was meant for. Within minutes, hashtags like King vs PM and Royal Rebuke began trending. It was the first public sign that the Crown itself was uneasy. Inside Downing Street, fury erupted. Sources close to the Prime Minister described shouting matches, accusations of betrayal, and panic talk of resignations. One aide told reporters that the palace has crossed the line. But to many watching at home, it felt like the opposite. The King was doing what no politician dared to do, stand up to the growing shadow of state control. That single act sent waves through. Parliament MPs began calling for an inquiry into the Public Safety Act. Even loyal members of the government started to distance themselves, muttering words like overreach and constitutional crisis. As night fell, tens of thousands gathered outside Buckingham Palace, waving flags and holding candles. The crowd was silent at first, eerily silent, as if waiting for the nation to exhale. Then, from somewhere deep within the crowd, a voice shouted, "We stand with the King!" It spread like fire, echoing across the capital. For the first time in weeks, the anger turned into something else, like not chaos, but unity. Ordinary people from every background, side by side, demanding accountability, demanding answers, demanding to know, where is Tommy Robinson? The following morning, everything changed. A short, unverified clip appeared online. Grainy CCTV footage from what looked like an undisclosed facility. It showed Robinson being escorted through a hallway by 2 guards, still handcuffed, still silent. The clip was only a few seconds long before cutting out, but it was enough to prove he was alive, enough to show that the government had been lying. Within hours, major outlets broke their silence. Secret detention confirmed. One headline read, "Government faces constitutional showdown," said another. The story could no longer be contained. The Prime Minister appeared before cameras, pale and defiant, insisting the arrest was within the bounds of national law. But her words fell flat. Too many lies had been told. Too many freedoms trampled in the name of control. In Parliament, opposition leaders called for an emergency session. Nigel Farage demanded immediate release. Even Rachel Reeves and David Lammy, normally firm government defenders, urged de-escalation. For a moment, it looked as though the entire political order might collapse under its own weight. That night, as protesters surrounded Westminster, chants grew louder, the air thick with tension and rain. Riot police formed walls, but they didn't move forward. Some even removed their helmets and stepped back, refusing to engage. Then a sudden roar. The gates of Parliament swung open, and through them walked a small group of MPs led by a defiant cross-party coalition waving a document high above their heads. A formal motion calling for a suspension of the Public Safety Act and a full investigation into unlawful detentions. The crowd erupted. Inside that noise, one truth had become undeniable. The people had forced the government to listen. The machine that once silenced them now trembled before them. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the tide had turned. A country that had been sleepwalking through decades of quiet control was suddenly awake. By midnight, Robinson was released. No press conference, no explanation. Just a black car pulling up outside a police station in the outskirts of London and a man stepping out into the cold. He looked older, quieter, but different. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. He said only one sentence before walking away. "This was never about me, it was about you." The world watched as Britain took a long, shaking breath, for now the crowds were dispersing. But something fundamental had changed, the understanding that silence had nearly destroyed them, and that truth, no matter how dangerous, was worth fighting for. And as dawn broke over Westminster, one question lingered like smoke in the morning air.